Hey, William Gilmore here for the ScreenwritersJourney.com, and today I am angry screenwriter. Very, very angry. Well, okay, angry may be a bit harsh. Aggravated. I'm definitely aggravated. And that's because there's been a couple of incidents this past week that kind of drive home a theme that I see occurring regularly, either in workshops or in the online forums, and that is a certain lack of, I don't know how else to say it, but disrespect for the writer, or at least a lack of understanding for what we do. Sitting there all day at a computer typing away. Now, sometimes that lack of understanding comes from friends and family who are just wanting to spend more time with us, because we do sort of lock ourselves away in our little writer's garret at times. But other times, those comments are coming from other artistic collaborators in the industry, whether it be a director or an actor, and sometimes even other writers. I see it a lot in the online forums where one writer is being criticized by another writer for offending, for insulting directors and actors with their writing. And usually the comment is left at that. You're insulting them, you're stepping on their toes, you're doing their job for them. Learn your job. And that doesn't seem to be a very helpful critique. Even if the writer is making those mistakes, there should be a better way of explaining that. And then there's the incident that happened at the Action on Film Festival in Monrovia, California. I went there this past week. A project that I had worked on as a cameraman, not as a writer, was entered into competition there, sessions with Agnes and Estelle. So I went to support the project and the writer and the director. And while I was there, I got to see a lot of different interesting pieces, features, shorts. Some were very good, some were, but it's a film festival. You're going to see all kinds of things. And while there, I met a young man who's a producer, director, and a writer who's actually got a fairly substantial resume for such a young guy. He's done a number of projects, features, shorts. He's produced, he's directed, and as I said, he's written. And he had a film in the festival that he did all three on. And it was a found footage horror film. And he was telling me that he did it in 6 days. They were able to shoot this project in just 6 days because they used real method actors. And he really emphasized that they were real method actors, as opposed to the imitation variety of method actors who only act like they're acting. Is how I read that. It just seemed like a funny thing to say. But I went with him on it, and I was very intrigued by his project because of that 6-day schedule. Now, it was a found footage, so with found footage, you have a certain amount of leeway with your setups, your camera angles. You can wing some things because it's found footage. Although you probably should not wing it as much as some people seem to think you can. Those things still need to be thought out. But there is a certain amount of leeway. I'm not sure there's enough leeway to do 6 days of shooting, but I was intrigued and wanted to go see this film. And I get in, and it did not take long. I mean, minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, before I realized, quite obviously, that there was no script to this story. It was an exercise in improvisation for the actors, and it appeared that they just turned the camera on and said, go. And they were trying to create a forward-moving story, and there wasn't apparently not much was given to them, or it didn't seem to be in the screening. The first hour of the movie, basically the premise of the story was a group of young adults who had been to college together get back together for a reunion camping trip. And they get on the road and they drive 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 and they drive. Car breaks down for a few minutes, and then they drive some more, and they drive and they drive and they drive. A lot of driving in this movie. About 60 minutes of a 90-minute movie was in the car driving to the campsite, with the camera in the middle doing this, going back and forth between the the various action in the front seat and the back seat. It was like a tennis match, and the actors were definitely struggling for things to say. There was, at one point, a woman just sort of randomly commented that she's a bartender now that she's out of college, and never went any further than that. Really didn't find out anything before that. Didn't find out nothing. It was babble, babble. And then they finally get to the campsite, and they discover something spooky. Somebody gets possessed, and then everybody dies. And that's sort of exactly how it went. 60 to 70 minutes, probably 70 minutes of the movie. The first 70 minutes, if you'd taken a pair of scissors and just snipped that first 70 minutes off, it wouldn't have made the slightest bit of difference to the story. It wouldn't have influenced it one way or the other. You could have picked up with the arrival at the campsite and gone from there. And they would have ended up with a mediocre short, as opposed to a really long, bad feature. And it seemed a shame because there was a lot of time and a lot of energy, effort, money put into this project that could have been so much better if they'd even outlined it a little bit, or at least there was obviously some type of outline. We know we're going to get in the car, we're going to get to a campsite, and we know everybody's going to die. But that's should have been a little more thought out than that. So then I went to the talk back, and that's where things really started to sort of fall apart. It's when the director got up first and started talking about how, and he's a writer himself, so I was really surprised that he said some of these things, that he didn't want a script. He didn't want the contrivances that the screenwriter brings to a project. I'm not sure what that meant. That he wanted something real and organic and relatable to the audience, that just he didn't feel could be accomplished by writing a script. I was thinking, really? I mean, none of that really makes any sense. And then the actors joined in. I mean, they're all up on the stage, talking to an audience, and the actors got up there and started talking about how freeing it was not to have a screenwriter, how freeing it was not to have a script, that they were actually able to finally create something real and organic and something that the audience could really relate to. And it was just, you don't need a writer if you can trust your actors to use their skills. They will create what you need and bring it to life in a way that no screenwriter could. And I'm listening to this, and I'm going, I can't believe that fellow artistic collaborators are up on stage dissing screenwriters like that, particularly since I've heard many, many times from actors about how much they've trained, how much they've studied their craft, that they are professionals and they don't get the respect they deserve. And I'm listening to them up there on the stage just ranting and raving about the absolute non-necessity of the screenwriter, that we could just eliminate them. And I had to turn away and leave. I was afraid to speak up and say anything, because if I did, it would probably just spill out of my mouth, and I would say things I would regret, and I would get carted out of the film festival. So I kept my mouth shut and just left. And I spent the next couple of days fuming about that. But it got me thinking, and I started seeing things in the online forums with comments that are directed towards screenwriters, even by other writers, that aren't always polite and aren't always productive. They're not offering constructive criticism. It's just, I'm going to zing you because you don't know what you're doing and I do. And it doesn't seem to be very productive all the way around. So I started thinking about things and how we could maybe adjust our own writing to take care of some of these problems, or maybe get a conversation going with our fellow collaborators to get a better respect going both ways, because respect is a two-way street. And then, before I could get very far with that train of thought, I went to one of my writers' workshops and encountered yet another incident where a screenwriter was called out. I will talk about that in part 2, and then examine sort of some of the reasons why this lack of respect, or this impoliteness, this incivility is rearing its head. And in part 3, I'll discuss ways that we can maybe take care of that. So, until next time, I am William Gilmore for the ScreenwritersJourney.com. Keep writing and keep it civil.